In 1916, an 18-year-old boy lost his father and his older brother and was left with no money. In order to survive, he went to Fiat hoping for a job. Unfortunately, Fiat rejected him, leaving him hopeless. But would you believe? Later, that same boy didn't just get a job in the car company, but built his own luxury sports car company, Ferrari, and eventually sold it to Fiat. However, building a Ferrari wasn't easy. He built Ferrari during the toughest times, the Great Depression and World War II. During this period, his factory was bombed twice and left him with some more problems. This is the crazy and true story of Enzo Ferrari and Ferrari cars. Enzo Ferrari was born on February 18, 1898 in Modena, Italy, during a time when cars were starting to replace horses and carriages. He came from a very poor family. His father, Alfredo Ferrari, owned a small fabrication business in the town of Modena, just making enough money to support the family. Enzo also had an older brother named Dino. During this period, cars on the roads were mostly made by local workshops or family businesses. These businesses worked hard to build good cars and competed with each other. Also, it was the same time when Modena and Italians were gaining a reputation for making great cars. At the age of 10, Enzo's father took him to Bologna to watch the Coppa Florio, one of Italy's first and most famous road races. Enzo couldn't take his eyes off the race. He loved seeing the cars speed by, with their engines roaring and dust flying in the air. He was amazed by the racers, who kept control of their cars at such high speeds. That day, Enzo's love for cars and racing grew, and he decided that he would become a racer when he grew up. Enzo was so obsessed with racing and cars that he attended every road race in Italy, sometimes even skipping school just to watch them. However, Enzo followed his curiosity, and by the time he was 12 years old, he joined his father's workshop where he was doing welding work. He would go to school in the morning and spend his afternoons at the workshop. It was there that he started learning important skills for his future. For the next 3 years, he continued to work in his father's workshop. At the age of 15, Enzo got his first job as an apprentice mechanic at a local garage in Modena. This job gave him practical experience in working with automobiles and allowed him to further develop his mechanical skills. But as soon as he joined, disaster struck. World War I began. Unfortunately, the war forced Enzo to put his racing dreams on hold. But before he could do something else, Enzo's life actually got much worse. In 1916, Enzo and his family caught a terrible flu called the Spanish flu, an epidemic that killed millions of people. Enzo was lucky enough to survive, but he lost his father and his older brother, Dino. The pain of losing both of them was deep, and Enzo was left heartbroken, facing a tough time without the two people who meant the most to him. After his father's death, the family business collapsed, leaving Enzo with almost no money. He desperately needed a job to survive, so he went to Fiat, hoping for a job. But Fiat rejected him. Thankfully later, Enzo found a job as a test driver at CMN, a car manufacturing company that used old truck bodies and built small passenger cars. It wasn't easy though. The work was tough, and he had to prove himself every day. He spent long hours testing cars, often facing doubts from others about his abilities. But Enzo didn't give up. He worked hard, improved his skills, and showed his passion for racing. Slowly, he earned the trust of the manager and the team. By 1919, his hard work paid off, and CMN hired him as a racing driver. That same year, Enzo made his debut in his first competitive race at the Palma Poggio Berceto hill climb. Unfortunately, he didn't win, but this first race started his career as an official racer. For the next few years, Enzo raced all over Italy and built a reputation for being reliable and smart. He used his understanding of mechanics to carefully make his car better. His natural talent for driving, along with this smart approach, helped him grow in his racing career. Enzo was doing well, but then he decided to leave CMN, and that's when everything began to change. However, Enzo decided to leave CMN and join Alfa Romeo because they gave him the opportunity to drive the best and most advanced racing cars using the latest technology. At that time, Alfa Romeo was one of the top racing car companies, and joining them was a big step forward in Enzo's racing career. He had the chance to race Alfa Romeo's cutting-edge cars on some of the biggest racing tracks in the world, and he grabbed that chance with both hands. In 1920, Enzo made his debut with Alfa Romeo at the Targa Florio race, driving one of their cars. He finished in second place, a major achievement that helped him gain recognition in the racing world. Within the next 3 years, Enzo participated in several races with Alfa Romeo's cars, winning many of them. By this time, Alfa Romeo had become Italy's leading car manufacturer and had a strong presence in racing. Enzo's professional life was going well, and at the same time, his personal life was also moving forward. He fell in love with Laura, a young woman from a wealthy family in Turin. In 1923, they got married, starting a new chapter in his life. But not long after, another tragedy happened. In late 1923, Enzo Ferrari lost another person from his life, a close friend and fellow racer, Ugo Sivocci, who tragically died while practicing for the Italian Grand Prix race. Sivocci wasn't just a teammate, but like a family member to Enzo, and his death made Enzo emotional. For the next few months, Enzo couldn't bring himself to race. Although Enzo was set to drive for Alfa Romeo in the Grand Prix race, but he withdrew at the last moment. Officially, it was due to illness, but in reality, he was still deeply affected by the loss of his close friend. For a while, Enzo took a break from racing and focused on spending time with his family. But when he came back, he and Alfa Romeo came up with an exciting idea to start a new racing team under the Alfa Romeo company. As a result, they launched a new racing team, Scuderia Ferrari. However, in late 1923, Enzo Ferrari won the Grand Prix race. During this time, Enzo met the mother of Francesco Baracca, a famous Italian pilot who had tragically died when his plane was shot down in World War I. She suggested that Enzo use her son's prancing horse symbol on his cars. Enzo liked the idea and added a yellow background to the horse, representing his hometown, Modena. This is the same logo which later became a symbol of Ferrari's legacy. Enzo began using the prancing horse logo for his own Scuderia Ferrari team. Soon, the team won its first race at the Mille Miglia, driving Alfa Romeo cars. Over the next few years, Scuderia Ferrari won several big races, including the Italian Grand Prix, Targa Florio, French Grand Prix, and Spanish Grand Prix. As Scuderia Ferrari's fame grew, Enzo attracted more sponsors and was able to earn more money, helping to further build the team's success. By this time, Enzo was also a racing driver for Alfa Romeo. Meanwhile, in January 1932, Enzo and his wife were blessed with a baby boy. They named him Dino, after Enzo's late brother. At this point, Enzo decided to retire from racing and focus entirely on managing his racing team. But in reality, this son made him realize the importance of living a life for another person. In 1933, Alfa Romeo promoted Enzo to head of their racing department. This new role allowed him to focus on the technical side of racing and manage the drivers. Under his leadership, Scuderia Ferrari kept winning races. On the other side, Enzo also helped organize the racing team and worked on improving the cars used in the races. He became known for his strong understanding of cars and his ability to get the best performance out of them. Enzo was doing well for Alfa Romeo and Scuderia Ferrari. In short, Enzo was having a great time. But it didn't last long because in 1937, another twist came. However, Scuderia Ferrari was backed by Alfa Romeo, but by the end of 1937, Alfa Romeo was facing financial problems. Also, they needed to cut costs and reduce their involvement in racing. As a result, Alfa Romeo decided to take full control of Scuderia Ferrari and shut down the racing team. Despite this, Enzo got his old job back as the sporting director at Alfa Romeo. But in 1939, he had a big fight with Ugo Gobbato, the managing director of Alfa Romeo. Because of this fight, Enzo decided to leave Alfa Romeo and stop working with their racing team. After leaving Alfa Romeo, Enzo was left with some money, but instead of walking away from the racing world, he decided to start his own racing team. But there was one problem. Alfa Romeo made an agreement that Enzo couldn't use the Ferrari name or race under it for the next 4 years. With no other option, Enzo had to agree. Now, Enzo was unsure about what to do next, but one thing was clear: he wasn't going to give up easily. While working with Alfa Romeo, Enzo Ferrari gained a deep understanding of car engines and how to get the best performance out of them. He became highly skilled at knowing what made a car run smoothly and fast. With this knowledge, he decided to start his own company, Auto Avio Costruzioni, a company supplying parts to other racing teams. Enzo's new business had just started and a major problem arrived. In In 1940, World War II began and the whole world was struggling. Alfa Romeo, along with other car companies, stopped racing during the war. Many manufacturers, including Alfa Romeo, shifted their focus to making military vehicles and war equipment instead. The Mille Miglia, Targa Florio, and other big races had all been cancelled or postponed because of the war. He kept hoping the war would end soon, but as the years went by, he realized he couldn't just wait and do nothing. In order to survive, Enzo also started producing war equipment. Enzo was making some money by selling war equipment to the government, but not for long because soon his bad luck was on the way. In 1943, his factory was bombed by Allied forces. Just when he managed to rebuild, it was bombed again. His factory was bombed twice. Enzo was completely broken. Everything he worked so hard for seemed to be falling apart. However, in the next 2 years, World War II ended, and so did Enzo's agreement with Alfa Romeo. Finally, he was free to use the Ferrari name again. Enzo now had two choices. He could leave the world of racing cars to do something else, or he could rebuild everything from scratch with the little money he had left. For Enzo, the decision was clear. He chose to rebuild. He knew deep down that racing and cars were the only things he truly understood and loved. Therefore, Enzo decided to start making sports and racing cars for upcoming races, and that's how Ferrari was born. In 1947, he launched his very first Ferrari, the 125S. It had a small but powerful 1.5-litre V12 engine with 118 horsepower. Back then, it was really fast, hitting a top speed of 150 kilometers per hour. The car was light, sleek, and designed for racing, with a simple open design and space for just 2 people. That same year, the Ferrari 125S entered its first race at Piacenza, although it didn't win. The car impressed the crowd and rival racers with its performance. Enzo called it a promising failure. Luckily, just 2 weeks later, the same car made a comeback, winning its first victory at the Grand Prix of Rome. This win was more than just a trophy for Ferrari. It was a hint that this was only the beginning of Ferrari's journey. Needless to say, Ferrari didn't stop there. In the next few years, they launched several iconic cars, including the Ferrari 166mm, Ferrari 250 GT, Ferrari 375 F1. In 1948, Ferrari launched its first open-wheel car, and the following year, that same car won the Lago di Garda race. However, Ferrari's big breakthrough came in 1949 when they won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, one of the most prestigious endurance races, with the Ferrari 166mm. In 1950, Ferrari entered the Formula One World Championship. Their first victory came in 1951 at Silverstone with Jose Froilán González behind the wheel. Enzo was so emotional after the win that he cried when they finally beat Alfa Romeo. Ferrari continued to dominate Formula One. In 1952, Alberto Ascari won Ferrari's first Drivers' World Championship, and they repeated the victory in 1953. Meanwhile, to fund its racing activities in Formula One and other major events like the Mille Miglia and Le Mans, Enzo Ferrari's company started selling sports cars to the public. The money earned from selling these cars helped cover the high costs of racing, including building and maintaining race cars, paying drivers, and handling travel expenses for the races. This approach allowed Ferrari to stay in business and keep competing at the top level of motorsport. But that is certainly not the end of the story. Unfortunately, in 1956, Enzo's son Dino passed away at the age of 24 due to muscular dystrophy, a disease that weakens the muscles and makes it difficult to move. Enzo had always dreamed that Dino would carry on the Ferrari legacy one day. Losing him was one of the toughest moments of Enzo's life. The pain of losing his son stayed with him for a long time. Throughout his life, Enzo had lost many people he cared about, from his father and brother to his close friends, and now, most painfully, his son, Dino. Not only had Enzo faced personal losses, but in 1957, during the Mille Miglia race, a Ferrari 335S crashed into a crowd, killing the driver Alfonso de Portago, his co-driver, and 9 spectators, including 5 of them who were children. Because of the crash, Ferrari and the tire company were charged with manslaughter. Eventually, after a long and lengthy trial, the court dismissed the case. However, in the 1960s, Ferrari was facing financial challenges due to new safety and environmental standards for its road cars. Additionally, Ferrari wanted to race in multiple categories. Because of this, Enzo started looking for a business partner who could invest in the company and provide the support he needed. Luckily, Fiat was ready to invest money in Ferrari for a 50% share. Enzo was willing to accept, but with one condition: he wanted to keep full control over Ferrari's racing department. On the other hand, Ford didn't agree to this condition. Because of that, Enzo turned down Ford's offer. Later, in 1969, Enzo Ferrari sold 50% of his company to Fiat, but he made sure that he would still have complete control over Ferrari's racing team. Interestingly, Fiat was the same company that had once rejected Enzo for a job. Ferrari became a joint company with Fiat and both owned equal shares. However, in 1988, Fiat increased its share and ended up owning 90% of Ferrari. But long before that, in 1971, at the age of 73, Enzo Ferrari decided to step down as the managing director of Ferrari. In the following years, he appointed Luca Cordero di Montezemolo to handle Ferrari's racing team, including its Formula One division. Under Montezemolo's leadership, Ferrari's racing team achieved great victories. In 1974, Ferrari finished second in the Formula One World Championship. Then, in 1975 and 1977, Ferrari won the World Championship. In the following year, Ferrari continued to win several races, but sadly, in August 1988, Enzo Ferrari passed away at the age of 90 due to leukemia. Enzo was a private person and didn't want a lot of public attention on his death. He requested that the news of his passing be made public only on August 16th, 2 days after his death. Before he died, he saw the launch of the Ferrari F40, which also became a symbol of his legacy, showing everything Ferrari stood for. Later, in 2002, Ferrari launched the Ferrari Enzo car as a final respect to its founder. As of today, Ferrari is still known as one of the greatest sports car brands in the world, and it all started with a poor boy who had just lost his father and older brother, left with no money. Despite constant failures, rejections, and personal tragedies, Enzo kept going. And if you want to see another entrepreneurial success story like this, check out my video on how Lacoste built their empire and defeated others. Just click the thumbnail and I'll see you there.